Good morning, class. I hope you're all well. This is Form 4 History, Lesson 9, Week 5. And just to start us off is an image which shows some of the reasons why the League of Nations failed in the 1930s. If we could all just take a few minutes to study that. And we'll also be looking at the Manchuria crisis of 1931 to 1933. We look at how the crisis weakened the League, as well as the League's decision about Manchuria, and why the League was unable to force Japan to obey its orders. So in 1931, the Japanese Empire controlled the South Manchuria Railway. So the railway through Manchuria had been built by the Japanese and it was controlled by the Japanese army. So the railway line carried Japanese goods into Manchuria and the rest of China, and this railway line also brought food and raw materials such as iron, coal, and timber back to Japan. In the 1920s, Japan had been a strong economy in the world, but due to the Great Depression, high tariffs, and trade barriers imposed by both USA and China against Japanese goods, Japan suffered immensely. So, Japan needed to get an empire which would act as a source of its resources and also provide ready market for the Japanese manufactured goods. And as it was mentioned earlier, the Japanese army controlled the South Manchuria railway line, and in September 1931, the Japanese claimed that the Chinese had attacked and sabotaged the railway. So, Japanese armed forces took advantage of this alleged railway attack by the Chinese and they invaded and removed the Chinese forces and troops. So, Japan set up a government in Manchuria which was to act under Japanese orders. So, China appealed to the League of Nations for support in this matter as part of their territory had been invaded by Japan. Unfortunately, the League took almost 1 year to respond, as these were the days before instant communication by satellite was available. So, the delay to investigate the Japanese invasion of Manchuria was long and very frustrating. And then we'll find that the report presented from the League of Nations in 1932, this is almost an entire year after the invasion, ordered that Japan should return Manchuria to China as Japan had acted unlawfully. And on 24th February 1933, the League's report was approved by 42 votes to 1 in the Assembly. So only Japan voted against the League's report. And Japan decided to continue with her invasion of China as an act of self defense against China, which was a state in anarchy. That is according to Japan. And after the League voted to approve the report against Japanese aggression, Japan withdrew from the League of Nations on the 27th March 1933 and also withdrew her support for the League. And the removal of Japan was a major blow to the League of Nations. And without America's support, sanctions against Japan would have been ineffective. So, Japan's refusal to obey decisions from the League of Nations clearly showed that the League was powerless as it could not stop an aggressive power or nation from invading its neighbors, which is what was happening in this particular instance. And within 3 years, both Hitler of Germany and Mussolini of Italy would follow Japan's examples. If we'll take a minute to study the image below, it shows the Manchuria crisis and how Manchuria was invaded by land and by sea, as well as what the Japanese Empire was like in 1931. We'll move on to the Abyssinia crisis of 1935. So, this originated at the Walwal incident, and it was an ongoing conflict between Italy and Ethiopia. So, the League of Nations ruled against Italy, and it voted for economic sanctions, which caused Italy's anger. And Mussolini of Italy wanted land and power for Italy, and disputes arose from a border between Abyssinia and the then Italian Somaliland. So Italy wanted to boost their national prestige, which had been wounded during their defeat in 1896 at the Battle of Adowa by Menelik II of Ethiopia, and this had helped Ethiopia to remain uncolonized. So, right underneath that is an image which shows the colonization of Eastern Africa. We'll see the British, French, and Italian possessions in Eastern Africa.